Hi everyone. In this video we'll take a look at how you can use R within Power BI. Specifically what we'll take a look at in this video is examples of how you can use visualizations in R but surface that within Power BI. Keep in mind that there are other integrations that Power BI has with R. So for example, you could use R as a data source and surface the data within Power BI, or you can take a look at one of my earlier videos on how that can be done. In today's video, we're specifically going to take a look at how you can surface R visualizations but within Power BI. And in doing so, we'll take a look at a couple of different types of visualizations. So we'll take a look at some rich but simpler visualizations like line graphs and charts. And then we'll progress towards some of the more advanced or more meaningful kind of like R visualizations, such as this correlation map here. And finally, we'll take a look at other examples of R capabilities and how you can bring R's strength in visualization, such as different forecasting solutions and how you can surface that within Power BI. So that's really the objective for this short video. So again, if you're interested in understanding how to use R as a data source and use that as a data source within Power BI, take a look at my other video. This video is specifically going to focus on the R visualization capability within Power BI. So a couple of things you'll want to keep in mind from a setup standpoint. So what you will need is you'll need to install R prior to running this demo if you've not already installed R. So step one is to install R and make sure it's all wired up. So if you've downloaded the latest Power BI, you can go to options and settings and click on options there and make sure that it's pointing to the right folder where you have the R version installed. Again, you could have multiple R versions installed on your machine, but please make sure that it's pointing to the preferred version before proceeding. So that's as far as setup goes, and then finally let's take a look at some quick examples. To work with some data today, I've downloaded the Forex data set. So this is the URL that you can use to download the file if you want to follow along with me and see the demo and try some of this on your own machine, but if not, feel free to skip that. So in any case, you can download the zip file which would contain a CSV file. So that's the data set that I'm using. To give you an idea of the actual data set itself, again, if you're not familiar with Forex, I wouldn't worry too much. This again is just a quick example. So imagine, if you will, we could have repurposed or replaced this with any other data set, and the demos themselves don't overly focus on the domain as such. However, in this data set, what we have is the date and various currencies. So we have the US dollar, we have the UK pound, we have the Japanese yen, and various other popular currencies, global currencies. As you can see, quite a rich set of data. And we have the data going as far as more than since 1999. So that's quite a good data set for us to work with. So that's the data that we are going to be using. So download the CSV file, and you can import that into Power BI. Once you've imported that into Power BI, the only thing that I've done, as you can see here, these are all the fields that are directly pulled from the CSV file. The only additional field that I've added is actually an extra column that in the very end I've added a column there, which is a year column. Basically extracts just a year, and we'll come to that and why we need that as we go through the demo. That's it for environment setup, if you will, and that's the sample data set that I'm going to be using. So with that said, let's actually dive in and start seeing how we can use the power of R within Power BI. Alright, so one of the things you'll notice, if you've got the updated Power BI, desktop application is you'll notice that as part of the visualization list you have a selector for R scripts. So click on the button, and here this is the placeholder for the visualization, and here you can see the script editor where you can type in some of the scripts once you have selected the data. And this is really where the strength or the integration between Power BI and R kind of like manifests. So here I can specify, for example, we'll definitely need, say for example, date. We'll do some plotting based on date, and let's just say for the time being for this demo I'm going to only use UK pound, pound sterling. So these are the only two fields that I'm selecting, and you'll notice that as part of the integration that we have with Power BI and R, behind the scene Power BI communicates with R and passes in all these attributes or these data parameters, and internally already wires it up so that it creates a data frame, which they're calling it as a data set variable here. And post that we can actually start running or writing our standard R commands. So let's start with something really basic. So like say for example if we wanted to plot say the UK pound, so we know that the name is dataset here. So and if you're familiar with working with data frames in R, this is nothing new. So I'm accessing the pound sterling GBP, and then if you click on run, you'll notice that it instantly appears with a plot. So what's happened behind the scene is this is pretty much the same plot, if you will, or the underlying plotting capability that you have within R, but now it's surfaced inside of Power BI. So a great example of how you can take data from Power BI, you can do a lot of cleansing, repurposing, transformation, if you will, all that data munging and the hard bits. You can use some of the visual kind of like strengths, if you will, and the capabilities of Power BI, and once you are happy with that data set, you can pass it on to R to do for example some of the visualization, machine learning, predictive analytics, etc. So again, keep in mind that it works exactly like in R if you were to run these commands locally within R. Like say for instance, instead of a data set, just to illustrate how the integration actually works, we don't necessarily have to plot data which is coming from the Power BI data source. It could be something that's calculated in memory within R. Say for example, if we, for purpose of this demo, I'm going to create a random data set. I'll use the R norm, let's say 100, and let's say plot X. So if I run this, again, as you would imagine, it's exactly like the experience within R. If you try to plot two things within R, it only shows the last within the output window of R. So exactly the same here. This again, you can resize it, and this is just a quick example. But one of the things you'll of course keep in mind or want to keep in mind is R has a lot more richer visualization capabilities. So for example, if you did not want to use some of the very simple plotting functions that you get within R, you can opt to use other more visually engaging visualizations within R using ggplot, ggplot2. So these are some quick examples of how you can run some R code and surface those rich visualizations. So again, I'm assuming you may be familiar with these libraries within R. So ggplot2, for example. Make sure that if you don't have these libraries already installed, go to R, install these with install.packages command, and then actually reference those libraries here from within Power BI. So again, in this particular case, we are using ggplot2, and if you've loaded the library, one of the sample data sets that you have is the diamonds data set. So I'm using the diamonds data set to provide this rich visualization here. So again, it's really ggplot2 is incredibly powerful at the range of the kind of visualization and the quality of the visualization. Other examples of our visualization include using ggplot for things like scatter plots and much more comprehensive kind of like plotting capabilities. However, at this stage, one of the questions that you may have is that, all right, that's all well and good. This sounds simple enough, but why wouldn't we just use Power BI itself for these kind of plotting? So as you can imagine, Power BI has all the capabilities like stack charts and scatter plots. So perhaps it's not necessary in these cases to use R itself, and to a certain degree that's true. Again, it depends on what kind of data analysis you're trying to do, and if the data is already prepped up and ready for display, such kind of simple visualization, you could possibly use just Power BI itself, like the scatter plot and various other plotting capabilities. There are strengths though when it comes to looking at both R and Power BI together, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Last thing before we move from this topic is just to show you some of the features, if you've not seen that already, is again, our charts tend to be quite involved when it comes to data. So one of the handy features is to open it in full screen mode or larger enhanced mode. So here you can actually see a much bigger view of that visualization, which again is quite handy, again, particularly if you're working with very dense data sets within Power BI and R. So that's just a quick tip. And then before we move on to the more meaty bits, because so far all we have seen is simple examples of how we can draw a plot, create a plot, and present that within Power BI. But the real strength of Power BI comes when it comes to much richer visualization and using the core frameworks and libraries that come part of R. So an example of that is using a correlationship and visualizing correlationship. So I'm going to go to R here for just a minute and show you, like say for example, this is a very simple script within R. So I'm using the same data set that I showed you earlier. So I'm just so that it's not confusing, I'm using the same nomenclature, if you will, or the naming convention that will be used by Power BI. So I'm reading that CSV into a data set. Let's just take a look at that data set. So so again, I'm within R. Let me clear that and try that again. Alright, so here as you can see, it's the same data set that I showed you earlier in the Excel document. So we can load that data set here, and we create a data frame. And one of the things I'm doing here as an example within R before we take it to Power BI is plot the correlationship. So if you're familiar with how correlationship works, it basically looks at the data frame that I pass as a parameter and tries and sees how correlated each one field is against the other. So this is an example of the correlation. So I'm sending these 5 different currencies, and we can see how it correlates. So this is a kind of like the more boring but numerical kind of like view, which is still very, very handy for deeper analysis, but it plots a correlationship. So you can have a look at that, but what we're specifically interested in is to actually plot it. If you don't have this library already installed, you can install it via install.packages and pass in the correlation plot library. It will tell you if you don't have the library already installed, but on my machine it's installed already. So I'm going to skip that. So let's plot it, and this is what it looks like. So again, if you're familiar with this plot, there's nothing new here, but if not, it's a quick visual way to look at multiple variables and understand how it correlates to other variables. So for example here, the pound or for example, in this case, the USD has US dollar has a very high correlation with UK pound, which again, if you come from a forex background or into currencies, that's very obvious. But I'm just explaining the underlying data set. And if it's the opposite correlation, like say for example, what this means is if the pound increases, US dollar increases, and vice versa. Whereas here it's negatively correlated, so that basically means like if the pound value increases, the Australian dollar actually decreases, as an example. So this is a quick visualization. So we can easily bring, if you already have code within R, you can easily bring that into Power BI. So here I've already created that in advance. So here if I click on this visualization, you'll notice just a quick walkthrough of the code, and feel free to pause the video if since I'm going through this really quickly. So just walking through the code, what we need to do is, as I mentioned earlier, make sure that the required libraries are already installed. And here I'm using the capability of R here. So within this data set, passing in these many fields here. So I've taken a bunch of different currencies and using those as parameters here. And then finally, taking a smaller data set. I could have used the original data set, but again, I've opted for a much smaller view of that data set, and finally running the correlation plot. So again, code-wise, it's identical to what you've seen here, so pretty much the same. But when I run this, again, no surprises, it creates a great visualization. You'll also notice that it gives you some UI feedback here at the top left. So if I click on run again, you'll notice that yep, there was a quick loading indicating that the script is running. So that's it. We have now got that same visualization in R, but then this is where things start getting more interesting. So now that we are using we are using Power BI, we can create interactive dashboards. And that's really an area where R out of the box is quite limiting, in the sense that any visualization that you create within R, such as the examples that I've been showing you, like if that's not that one. Yeah, that was here. So even these images, they're not interactive. I can't visually slice and dice any of this. So if I wanted to do some analysis, typically I would possibly look at other alternatives. If I'm using R, maybe something like Plotly, for example, or use R charts or Shiny or some other more interactive kind of like charting experiences to visually slice and dice the data. But that's an area where now we can actually use Power BI. So you remember in the data set, one of the columns that I created using Power Query was a year column. So I can just drag and drop the year column. Maybe let me just do that right now. So if I select the year column and I'm just resizing that. As you can see, we've got from 1999 to 2016, and I'm going to change this to filter. So now here's where the magic happens, or how it's really wired up together. So this becomes a filter, if you will, that passes data from Power BI into R. So let's say, for example, I want to analyze the data across different years. So for example, I click here, so 1999, you can see all the currencies there, highly correlated. Everything's kind of like correlated, or not correlated, or lightly correlated. But years like, say for example, the financial crisis, when it all started going downhill, you can see quite the fluctuation in the markets. And as with most markets, there tends to be a period of predictive kind of like stability, and followed by kind of like cycles, if you will. So here you can see a great example of how we are leveraging the core strength of R through these kind of like rich statistical analysis and visualization, but complementing that with much more easier and interactive kind of like visual slicing and dicing features, if you will, that you get with Power BI. So again, we are of course not restricted to just these slicer as a visual filter. We could have used other visual filters like even pie charts, stack charts, or pretty much any of these visualizations as a filter, if you will, to slice that piece of data and send that into R. So this is a good example of how you can use both R and Power BI, the strengths, if you will, of both of these. The last example that we'll take a look at is an example of a forecasting model. So forecasting is quite an elaborate topic in itself. I'm not going to spend too much time in this video talking about the details of forecasting itself, but I just wanted to quickly show you an example of how you can use R and Power BI together to do some very basic forecasting. So again, I'm using the same data set. Again, I'm just interested in an example here. Just added an R visualization, and here's the code. So if you can follow along with me, so I'm sending the date and the UK pound, and here basically what we are going to be using is the forecast library. So if you've not already installed it, I suggest that you go to R and run this command to install the required packages, and then you can of course reference that forecasting library here. So we are going to be using the ARIMA forecasting model, and it's a complex topic in itself. So for the benefit of just showing the integration between R and Power BI, I've just set to automatically create a model as opposed to us creating a model from scratch and comparing different models. So I've taken a shortcut here just to illustrate the point. So here you can see that we are leveraging the power of R and forecasting capability of R. So this is the projected forecast for the proposed duration. So here we have the actual command here that takes in the model and plots that. So the data set itself is only to, what I've done is I've filtered it for the first 100 list items or observations here, and not the whole data set, which has about 4,000 odd observations. So here's the top 100, and if we plot it, this visualization actually shows how the ARIMA model forecasting works. So we have data up until this point here, that's the first 100 observation, and then we've used R to forecast for the next set of days here. So as an example, to show how it actually does forecasting, so again, this is of course an overly simplified example of forecasting, and of course it's too limiting to use this in the real world, but just to actually show you how forecasting is actually working. So I've just copied the same code bits here, and just to see what the actual data set was, because our forecasting stated that it's the trend is kind of like downwards, if you will. So in this case, I'm gonna say take the 105th one, and let's see what happens. So sure enough, you'll notice that I've taken 5 additional observations. So here you can see that this was the last point which comes here. There's been a small spike, but definitely the trend is moving downwards post that. So in a manner of speaking, the forecasting was fairly accurate, and you would you might even point a finger and say that of course this was a case where I've selected a data which shows that the forecasting was accurate. Yes, I'm guilty as charged, but again, it's just proving the concept as opposed to outlining a clear and actionable kind of like a forecasting model. So again, this was just a quick demo and example. So in summary, we have seen a couple of different examples of how you can use R within Power BI. So we have taken some simple examples of how you can do some basic plotting using the out-of-the-box plotting capabilities of R. Again, if you're using other more advanced libraries like ggplot2, for example, we have seen instances of how that can be leveraged as well. Seen examples. This is really where the integration between R and Power BI kind of like stands out when you can create these kind of like interactive dashboards. Again, this was a very simple example. You can imagine using the other richer visualization capabilities of both Power BI and R and creating these interactive kind of like dashboards, leveraging the strength of both solutions. And finally, examples where we are really showcasing how you can use the core strength of R for things like predictive analytics, forecasting, even the wealth of machine learning libraries that you have within R, surfacing that and creating that rich data visualization and data science platform, if you will, within Power BI. So that sums it up for this video. Again, if you haven't watched my other video around Power BI and R, I highly encourage you to take a look at it. Hope this video has been helpful. Do subscribe if you like the video. I'll be publishing further videos and R, machine learning, big data and analytics soon. Thanks everyone for watching. Cheers, bye.